Story of my life.
There's a microphone there.
Good afternoon. Do I need to use a microphone or can everybody hear me? I need a microphone. Do I need to hold it up? Is that better? Yes. Right. Good afternoon and welcome to this memorial service for Keith. The family have asked if I would kick proceedings off today. My privilege. And it's a memorial service, so I think today is really memories, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have fond memories. Being ambulance, there's a lot of stories that we can't share, and I think they remain personal between everybody. But Keith, I think, would be very embarrassed if he knew this event was as big as it is. When we spoke to him a few weeks before he passed, he didn't want a service. Keith being Keith, just wanted to quietly disappear, and no fuss, no bother. But the boys talked him into having something, and I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge Keith for what he has done over the years. He was not a pomp and ceremony person, and I was talking to him when we visited that I was doing a project with service medals, and he made the comment he didn't have a service medal, and I knew that was untrue because I'd seen the list, and it was Linda that found them, and Scott Hollingshead contacted me to say yes, he did have one. So to start the memories, he was not a uniform sort of person, but he was a uniform person. He spent pretty much all his life in uniform. He joined, well, go back to school, it was school uniform. He went to Ohinemuri College, uniform. He joined St John, uniform. He had a break, went to Ohinemuri Traffic. From there he came back to St John. He then went to corporate cabs. He came back to St John, and in between he played bowls. So he had a uniform virtually all his life. And talking about medals, when I discovered the list of medals, I thought I'll read some out because some will be here today, and it certainly will bring back some memories. The service medal actually wasn't issued to full-time staff till 1991. And when they came out in alphabetical numerical. So round Keith's listing on this huge list, we have the first one starting at number 4750 was Bruce Graham. Then we go through some names. Doug Gribble, Don Grusning, Elaine Gummer, James Hall, Keith Hall, John Harlow, Noel Hawkless, Grant Hurst, John Hodgkinson, Scotty Hollingshead, Tony Hoskin, Bob Howard, Steve Hutchison, Pat Jackson, and the list goes on and on. So there's a few memories in that list. So Keith actually spent 38 years with St John. His medal was presented. I don't think it's ever been out of its box. Certainly was never worn, and it still had the one bar on it that he got. So we've added the appropriate bars, and it's on display. And the family have suggested that I take it back to Auckland and have it mounted properly and displayed in the St John archives. I first met Keith when he was a full-time paid assistant. I've just discovered that when he left school he became a French polisher apprentice, but the fumes and everything affected his breathing, so he gave that away. But he was what we called an honorary assistant, and he went out at Marai Road with Fred Skerr, like I did many, many years previous. So Keith, with some of the other young guys of the day, were employed as full-time paid assistants Monday to Friday, And if you knew if you got Keith in the car, you were going to get all the stretcher jobs that day. But he was too young to drive, and such a likeable guy that he was coming up for his 21st. His parents had separated at that stage, and when we spoke to his mum, they did not have the wherewithal to put a party on. So one of the best kept secrets, I think, in St John was a party was arranged, and the only person that didn't know was Keith Hall. But the problem was Keith was into stock cars with his best mate Tank, and Saturday night, come hell or high water, was stock cars. So how did you get Keith to go anywhere but stock cars? So as a group of us put a bit of a plan together, and we were going to take him to Titties. Being a young 21-year-old, we thought it was time we took him to the strip clubs in Paeroa. And the idea was to get him out of it so everything else could be set up and arranged. We went to the Ohinemuri pub, had a couple of beers, a hamburger, and from memory it was Graham Colquhoun, Noel Beavers, John Jeffries, myself and Keith.
That's just Keith having to say.
He doesn't like them. So we went to Ohinemuri pub, and that was to give everybody a chance to set things up at the St John Hall, the old St John Hall in Otahu. And on the way to this supposed strip club, we had to stop at Otahu because Graham Colquhoun wanted to talk to the caterer. And this would have been in December. It was a fictitious reason to call in. We had Keith trapped in the back seat so he couldn't get out. Luckily he didn't recognise any of the cars parked at the car park. And Graham came out and said the caterer suggested we go and have a drink because it was Keith's 21st. So we walked in, and I think the photo there is Keith walking in to a hall full of people unsuspectingly for his 21st birthday. We never did get to Titties, but I'm sure when he lived on at Pitt Street and the training school was there was always plenty of trips for the out-of-town boards to the various strip clubs in Cairo. Keith was the sort of guy that thought about others, no fuss, no bother, and there are certain things that he did spontaneously. I actually worked closely with him on my Maddai Road 8 to 4 hospital roster. It coincided with his 7 to 3 Pitt Street hospital roster. So for 1 week we shared work at Auckland Hospital. While he was living at Pitt Street, he somehow was friendly with Graham Hart, who happens to be probably one of the most richest people in New Zealand. But Graham in those days was driving a tow truck, and I think it might have been for Ace. No, was it? Yeah. Barraclough, okay. But Graham was dating the daughter of an ex senior station officer at Pitt Street, Robin Hatton, and Robin's brother also drove. He was quite a large guy, so he was nicknamed Tiny Hatton. And of course, Graham couldn't really take his girlfriend out in the tow truck, so he'd come and park his tow truck at Pitt Street, pick up Keith's car, take Robin out, come back, and off he'd go. And I'm not sure if Keith was ever recompensed for that after Graham became a wealthy person. But such was the guy when Beryl and I moved into our new home on Mangere Bridge. Keith decided he would come and help, and he arrived with a flatbed trailer, it was a cart trailer from Orpins, and I think Robbie's here somewhere, and we took the first load from Verona Road up to the new home, and someone's not going to like this. On the way back down through Miller Road, there was this young lady. She was wearing a grey, suppose you'd call it trouser suit, who was obviously on the way to the bus stop. And Keith says, "Stop, stop, stop, I want to talk to him, stop, stop." So we pull up, and he winds the window down. He has a talk to this young bird, and she was in a bit of a hurry because she had the bus to catch. So we went on, but he was as happy as Larry. He just jacked her up to take her out on the Saturday night. That was in 1975. 2 years later, he married Barbara. And that, of course, is where the boys come in, and I guess they'll have memories to share about Keith. And Keith was pretty chuffed at having a couple of boys. I guess they were ready-made boys. He didn't have to go through the poo and nappy and all that sort of stuff stage. He, as I said, very thoughtful. At one stage, the executives had a night out for a couple of years around Christmas time. Ian Pickering arranged it. He was the chief, and Ian and Glenys. There was John and Helen Thompson, Beryl and I, Warwick Manning and Sue. And Keith heard about it, so he arrives round with his little car, picks up my big car, and unasked, he was there to transport us to town, and 11 o'clock he was there to bring us home. Just the little things that he did made him such a special guy. I'm sure there's plenty of people here that can add to the memory list, but one other small point is when Keith passed, Beryl and I were in Christchurch with Keith's daughter. There's a few people looked. We'd forgotten about it, but Keith reminded us when we were talking to him recently. Our eldest daughter Lorraine was in the hockey team at Onehunga High, and there was a photo in the local paper of the team, and she was wrongly named. She was listed as Lorraine Hall, and Keith thought it was a hell of a joke. Till I reminded them that I'd already paid 16 years upkeep. Perhaps he'd take on the next 16 years and pay for the wedding. That didn't go down well. So hopefully that's the sort of start of proceedings to get some people to share their thoughts and pay their respects to a great young man. He would be embarrassed if he was here. And one thing I'd have liked to have said to him was, what he thought about today's industrial proceedings going on in Auckland. Whether he would be for it or against it, but I'm pretty sure there's a meeting in the reunion in the sky, and it's probably being discussed up there at the moment. So get Johnny to just say a few words about his dad. I don't want to upset Johnny, but when we were talking to Keith and in later telephone conversations with him, he mentioned the fact that Johnny phoned him from Aussie every night, and the thing that really tickled Keith was before Johnny hung up, he would always say, "Love you, Dad." Yeah. So Johnny, I think, will try to say a few words. It's a tough occasion, and I'm sure he would feel that he could say something.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Thanks, Ian. Appreciate that. Didn't need to say last piece, right? Thanks, mate. Well, hey guys, I have written a few words. It's a great turnout. It's you know, Dad'd be proud. He did say to me before he passed. He said, if one of you stands up here and dribbles on, tell him to shut up, sit down. Everybody's had enough. So I thought I'd share a few things that you may know or may not have known about Dad. He could be grumpy. I know there's no surprise faces there, right? So but remembering back, you know, he never came home grumpy. And I think he probably used that grumpiness all on you lot before he got home. So, but I do remember, you know, I thought, well, you know, maybe he's coming home and he didn't have pooey nappies to change, but man, we gave him some shit. And we probably filled up his grumpy bags for you guys. So the next day you go to work and use it on you guys again. So you're welcome. Another thing that you may have not noticed, but I'm sure you did, he started morphing into Papa Smurf pretty quickly. He, you know, if he had a little Smurf outfit on him, he'd just look exactly like Papa Smurf. So, but that was only for 11 months a year, because in December he morphed into Santa. And you probably remember the photo that's sitting up there. You know, they were grey hair and the grey beard and the big belly. So the little kids, every time he came home from work and around his neighbourhood, actually loved it. So mateship was important to Dad. Just in a minute. Once you're his mate, you're a mate for life. So, we spoke about Pitt Street. He shared some good stories about Pitt Street, and they can't be repeated because a lot of people in this room have been incriminated. I always said Dad should write a book about Pitt Street, and he said we'd all get locked up. You heard a little bit about the strip clubs. There's a lot more shit that went down that, eh? But and I guess a few beers this afternoon, those stories are going to come out. Scott, wherever you are, can't see you, but yeah, mate, don't try and hide now. So I don't know if you know, Dad was a union delegate. He was a mentor, a leadership leader. He was professional, and he always had his teammates back. I got my licence in 1983, and excuse me. So like the 80s and 90s, Dad was my own Google Maps. He knew Auckland like the back of his hand. Any street, including Shit Street, he would send me up, and it was just so nice to know. Even then I started like venturing out into the wider, you know, suburbs and you know, the Naki and the Bay of Plenty and Wellington, and he'd always tell me that the best place to go and the scenic road and the road stay off. So it was great. He never forgot a face, a name or a place. He sort of had a photographic memory. So made it hard to bullshit because he was already a member. So I remember 20 years ago you said that, and you changed the story. So I miss Dad's laugh. I miss his, his whole laugh was sort of like a whole body laugh. We all know that one. And I always said to him, he reminded me of the old cartoon character Muttley. You know, so go Google that shit. You'll go, yeah, that's right. So the coins in the pocket, right? Everybody knows that. I said to somebody tonight, when the coins are rattling, it was all good. When they stop, you need to worry. You know, you didn't know if you're going to be praised or punished. But it was the keys. He did it at home. He did it everywhere. Did it on the sports field, everything. So everybody have a good memory of that. I miss talking about sports. We never bothered solving the world's problems. We tried to solve New Zealand's problems and St. John's problems. So, and they were some good conversations. So just to sign off, you'll always be in my heart there. And I carry the good memories with me. And as he used to say, you never say goodbye. He always said all the best. Love you, Dad.
Thanks, John. Beryl has one memory which she won't share, but I'll share on her behalf. It was about a couple of young bastards that came round home after shift one night with a case, a crate of beer, and there was a group of them, but there was two young guys there. One was Hollingshead and the other was Hall. And the washing basket was in the lounge. And my black socks were in the washing basket. So after a bloody great game of tug of war with my socks, they all went in the rubbish bin because they were tied that tight in knots that you couldn't get them out. Now, I think I had one pair that I could wear the next day going to work. But every time we talk about Hall and Hollingshead, I get reminded about that night they arrived unannounced at our place. I'm sure there are others who would like the microphone to say a few words or fill in some of the gaps that we have in our history.
I'll come up and tell a few stories before you go. I wrote, if people don't know me, I'm Scott Hollingshead, and I started just about 19 and a half years old at the ambulance, and Keith was driving in those days, and when I turned 21 I became a driver, and we used to call drivers in those days, now they're officers, but he wanted me to get into Pitt Street because he was single and I was single, and we'd been larrikins up till I went driving, so he worked with old Max Charlesworth, who was the big boss in those days, to get me in because I was working at Mallow Road, and he said to Max, Scott's got to travel in and we might need him for third or fourth call. And Max relented and put me into Pitt Street single men's quarters, and I have a roster at Pitt Street, so every 20 weeks Keith, myself and the late Bruce Sherritt and his wife Andrea used to go away, and basically we just got on booze for 4 days and then come back to work on the Wednesday. So we had a bit of a good time there. And I was just working out the other day, I've known Keith 52 years, so it gives you a rough idea of my age, but there's a lot more people here that know him longer than that. And so we could take for hours and hours. But one of the things that we love doing, Keith and I used to love getting into trouble, because they used to send you up to the hospital to do the hospital run, and you had to do a week. Well, Keith and I just loved it, because both for him and I said God gave us 5 things. And one was Middlemore Hospital, Green Lane Hospital, Auckland Hospital, North Shore Hospital, and no cell phones, so we could take out all these nurses and not get caught. So we were just absolute delinquents. And I remember once we used to go to the OT department down the bottom of the hill, and they were having their annual conference, and Keith and I said, oh well, we'll do a striptease for you at your national conference. So Keith and I got dressed up as strippers and went to this conference in Shelley Beach Road, and we're basically stripped off. Well, that was fine. And then we sort of cottoned on after we got dressed onto a girl. We were both trying to get her, and she drove us home. Well, we both got out of the car at the Pitt Street parking lot, and we both ended up starting vomiting. She said, "I'm not going to go with any of you guys tonight." And we were so pissed we were. But yeah, so we used to do lots of stupid things, and I think the one thing I say about Keith, he was one of my best mates, and a lot of you know that I went through last few years losing my son and my lovely wife, and basically, guess who was on the phone every week? Keith. How are you? What are you doing? You know, can I help you? To do all those sorts of things. And he was a real gentleman. And when he shifted down to Paeroa, I said, "What the hell are you coming to Paeroa for? You know, I can't even get my sister to come down here, let alone he come down." He said, "I only come down for one reason." He said, "I've got a really good friend, our Lynn." And he said, "She'll look after me when I get older." And she's done a marvellous job of looking after her, and her husband too. The two of the nicest people you could ever meet. You know, you all deal in life, but one thing about Keith, he was a grumpy old bastard, and everybody agrees in this room he was a grumpy old bugger, but if you needed him, he'd be standing right beside you. And you know, I could tell you stories and stories and stories, but one of the things is all the boys we used to go to the family and naval. We finished shift at 3 o'clock. We used to go to the naval and family, and then we'd be all on call that night, 3rd, 4th and 5th call. A number of times we all went out and we'd had too much to drink, and we'd arrive at an accident, and the police would look at us and walk away, and we'd load the patient in the ambulance and drive off down the road. And we did one accident, Keith and I had 2 trucks, and we arrived there and we were dying for a whittle. So we all stood in the ambulance bay at Auckland Hospital. Who should come along but the bloody matron of the hospital? Called us, but you know, we just did stupid things too. But when he met Barb, I remember me taking her out to Mangere and meeting Barb, and the little rugrats were this high, and I said, "Well, she's a good one. If you don't take her, I'll grab her." So, and so he ended up, Keith did honourable and got onto him. But I think that overall, you know, he's at peace now. He was suffering really bad. I used to come down try and come down every 2 weeks and see him, and you know, you slowly saw him deteriorating, and you know, he's in a happy place now. I really feel for him. He's in a happy place. He'll be still grumpy up there, and he'll be giving everybody whatto, but you couldn't ask for a better man in life. He's fabulous, and I'll miss him. You know, it wouldn't be a week that we didn't speak. So, you know, all I have to say is, you know, look after yourself up there, mate. Okay. Who's next? Captain.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Warwick Manning. I'm the chairman of the New Zealand Association of Ambulance Veterans, and Keith was one of our members right from the beginning. I have a personal relationship with Keith also that I'll talk about, but certainly in the first instance I'd like to express condolences to Keith's family and friend on his passing. He was always an enthusiastic member of our association, and even since he's passed we miss him greatly. We as an organisation supported him through his journey for the 18 months virtually that he was sick, and it was always a pleasure every couple of days to ring Keith or he'd ring me. At one stage there I got very ill myself, and next minute Keith was on the phone ringing me up, and I said, "Well, hey, this is all wrong, mate, I'm supposed to be ringing you." And he said, no, we want to make sure that everybody's okay. And that's the way it was, and we conversed with him all that time, and I'm very privileged that I could talk to him virtually right up to the end of it and discuss with him various things that he wanted and talk about memories and things like that. So he was a number one guy. Keith and me joined the ambulance service in 1969. I started in June. Keith had started 2 months before me, as you've already said, as a paid assistant. Now Keith, I would class as being a cross-generational ambulance officer, because he, at that time, a lot of the real old-timers were coming to the end of their service, and a lot of those men who were the stalwarts of the ambulance service in Auckland, Keith went out and assisted with them, and he learnt a lot of his values from those old guys, and probably got his backside kicked a few times by them too. But he had extremely good values, and he carried on that right throughout his career. On the Paeroa Road roster, we all had to do night shift, and Keith would be working Monday to Friday as a paid assistant, and then when it came over the weekend, we were on night shift, we were single crewed, but at the weekends we'd like to have somebody else with us, because believe it or not, Auckland was pretty with it back then as far as violence goes and things like that. And the first thing I used to turn to, and some of the other guys would say to Keith, "What are you doing Friday night?" "Oh, you're an assistant." We'd say, "Yep." And so Keith would finish work on Friday afternoon, go home, have a bit of a rest, and he'd be back at 11 o'clock with you and work with you through the shift. Now, you couldn't get anybody better. At those days when I first started on the road, I'm sure it was then, and I was only reflecting on that this morning, for night shift for the whole of the Auckland region, there was only 2 ambulances on the road. There was only 2 of us. There was the backup, the 4th call, but as far as first fronting was us. And then, of course, if one got sent down to Waiheke Island on the police launch or something like that, it was down to 1. And you would, so you had very, very busy times, and you really wanted somebody with you that knew what he was doing. Well, that was Keith. We've heard today about how loyal he was. Keith always had your back. We used to go into some pretty tough situations there, but Keith always had your back. You never had to worry about the back of the ambulance. It was immaculate. Keith kept that, and he was excellent in so many ways. He was just a number one guy, and it's always been a privilege to keep my friendship with Keith as he's travelled through the years. We've dropped apart sometimes, we've come back again, and certainly through since he's been sick, we felt that we needed to work, because having the same complaint he has, I could understand where he was coming from. So, to you all as a family, please be proud of him. I tried in the last few months, because you know how grumpy he can get, and nobody was, to make him understand how much he was loved and cared for. And that was the last words I had with Keith on the phone, to say, whatever happened, mate, just remember you're loved, you're cared for, and you're respected. So he was a great ambulance officer and a great person. And as we have over our badge, our qualification badge there, we have Te Ora o Te Whetū, which means Star of Life. I always rate Keith as being one of those stars. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Warwick. Can I twist anybody else's arm?
Hi, my name's Michelle. I've only known Keith 2.5 years. I moved into the RV camp to help my mum and dad. I go to Halsey one day and my mum points over to Keith, had his back to me. "That's my boyfriend." I said, "What do you mean that's your boyfriend?" She's been married to my dad 67 years, and yes, my dad is still there. So I got told to be nice to Keith. Okay, I met Keith. We had a pool game. He ended up being my partner. I sunk the black in that game. He just winked. I was like, "I sunk the black, Keith." He said, "We got third." I was so happy. I couldn't play pool, but I tried. He says to me one day at Halsey, sorry, I'm shaking, "I want to talk to you outside." I was like, "Oh fuck, what have I done?" I go outside and he says, "I want to ask you something." I said, "Okay. Would you come and do some cleaning for me?" "Oh, okay." So I ended up working for Keith once a week. I ended up making muffins. He loved muffins. I didn't know he was diabetic. So when I found out, I cut down on the sugar, cut down on the chocolate. He said, "You're still going to bake." "Yeah, but you're not getting all the sugar." So I ended up making all these muffins once a week, even at the hospital. So if any of yous had to eat them, I'm sorry, because I'm not that good at baking, but he was a good man. He wanted his car washed one day, and even though I did a bit of cleaning for him, which really didn't need doing, because for a single bloke, he looked after the caravan. I think it was more to help me out. I said to him, I can't wash the car. I've got arthritis in my elbows, and it was hard enough just cleaning. So we drive into Thames, and we go to the car wash, and it was shut. So he's like, oh, well, best we have lunch. So we went, had fish and chips, and he was such a gentleman. I felt a bit weird going, but he became a really good friend. My mum had a fall at the camp, quite bad, and she broke her nose, broke her wrist, when somebody had run for the ambo. I've never seen Keith run so fast with the little pack to jump start her because she had a pacemaker. So I saw him run one day into the caravan to help my mum. Daffodil Day came about a year ago. He buys a bunch of daffodils, he walks up to me, and I was like, oh, how lovely. He goes, they're for your mother. Oh, your girlfriend. So gave mum the daffodils. That's when she had her fall, and it was lovely. And as for all the phone calls, you do know you've all been on speaker when he calls. I won't say much about that. In the RV camp, I think we would have filled this whole room, so a lot of them are back at the camp watching on the live stream. The caretakers wanted to come today, but of course they're on duty. So everyone sends their love. And that's it. And I gave him that teddy bear when he went to hospital. It's now mine, okay? So I'm keeping it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Tracy. So Keith was my uncle, so I'm speaking on behalf of the cousins and they're here today. My first memory of Keith is he'd come round to Dad's house, and the moment he pulled up, my sister Shelley and I'd run and hide because he was one of 5 brothers, but he had the deepest, scariest voice. Like we'd get under Dad's chair. We wouldn't get up, and Keith would come in, and then we'd sneak away. He was a bundle of joy. My last message with him, I spoke to him a few times before he passed, and when I messaged him the last time, and I'm like, so you woke up today? He's like, yep, bummer. And I said, geez, your organs must be swelling now. And he messaged back, and he's like, what do you know about my organ? And I'm like, Keith, that's not an image that I was thinking I was going to have in my head on this particular day. But anyway, he's now upstairs with Alan and Dad, and so I think Nan will be keeping him in line. So if he causes any shit up there, she'll give him one behind the ears. And looking down on this, and as you say, if you want to, please, but Johnny organised it, so it'll be on you.
You'll be right.
You'll be right. So anyway, thank you.
Cheers.
Hi everybody, my name is Simon Barton. I used to be with the West Hack Rescue Helicopter in Auckland in the early days, and remember Keith from the control room, and used to quite often when the phone goes, we have a job for you. But I remember one of my biggest faux pas was when Keith was in the control room. We were flying along in the Jet Ranger, and in those days we had a radio switch on the floor. So if you wanted to transmit, you pushed it, you talked, pushed it again to turn the radio off. And we'd just been to a really bad job and dropped the patient off the hospital, and we're heading back to base. So I called up on the radio saying we're heading back to base. Keith responded, yeah, okay, good as gold. Thought I'd turned it off, and I hadn't. And I went, Jesus effing Christ, wasn't that a shit job? And straight over the radio was, Westpac, you're still on the air. The whole region heard the phone. Got back to the base, Keith rings up, and you get the laugh. And he never let me forget it. I caught up with him a few weeks ago, and spent about 3 hours. It was great, and we just laughed and talked about the old days. And yeah, it was good to catch up with you, mate, and take care. You're in good hands now.
I won't come up, but I'll just say that for his family, I feel sorry for you because Keith could not play golf. He really sucked. Okay, so if you want to find some golf balls, go down along the Matara and the Williams course and you'll find
Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Tennille, this is Kath. We've just written down a few of our memories and some of them have already been talked to, so we'll just try and skip over those so we're not repeating ourselves. I personally first met Keith when I joined the Ambulance Communication Centre or the Control Room or whatever other name's been out there for a while in 2006, and I was a very young impressionable call handler, and an impression Keith made. Over the years of working together, our professional working relationship also grew into a friendship, and a friendship that we treasure dearly. Keith has had many a role in ambulance communications, most known for the jingle of the coin, we talked about that, and also his incredible ability to locate an emergency caller, be it in a metropolitan, rural or remote area with minimal information. As John, you've already alluded to, his geographical knowledge is absolutely mind-blowing. I learnt very early in my career that he was literally a walking, talking map, knowing of every single petrol station there was in New Zealand. He also knew all the right ways that crews should go. And he also knew all the right ways that crews should respond, and he had plenty of words if a crew didn't make the ETA that he expected them to make. As Kath has summed nicely by saying, Google and CAD will never outdo you, Keith. There are many other words that could be used to describe Keith, and we'll just say a few. Professional, a man of ethic, high standards, articulate, pretty strict, resilient, safety conscious, mentor, fearless leader, and straight up. He had an infectious laugh, a great sense of humour, and on the downtime, he loved a prank or two. Keith was well respected by all who knew him in the ambulance service. Some may say they were a little scared, until they realised how privileged they were to work with a man of his regard. Many a paramedic has shared with Kath and I how safe they felt knowing that Keith had oversight and captained our comms ship. There's also something to be said about a manager who walked every staff member to their car in the dark on a swing shift, made us check our car before we all got in. Little does he know that every time he did that for me personally, it gave me the heebie-jeebies and I'd want to run out. And then he'd stand at the door, and in the days that you're allowed to smoke at the front door, he'd have his cigarette there and he'd watch us drive the car park and wave goodbye. But very evident, as you were saying, Ian, about making sure that he was kindly doing all the things that he could. He was very protective and supportive, and he treated women respectfully. I'm very grateful for having him in my corner and for offering his words of wisdom when needed, telling me how I should run the comm centre, including something very special is what I could expect after I became the mother to having twins. Keith formed a very special bond with my children, who absolutely adored him, and they proudly honoured him by calling him Uncle Keith. So, Uncle Keith, we'll miss you so much, but the privilege has been ours. Go well, my friend, until we meet again.
One last call before I think that probably wraps it up. I guess we could say Keith was a gentleman. He was a special person, and he was one of the old school ambulance officers. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but I will. he was the old school. He was different to today's breed of ambulance officers. He was a gentleman, and for all his faults, he really respected females. I can vouch for that. He will be missed, and I think it would be appropriate to have the final call, which I understand has been arranged through the comm centre in Auckland.
All units, stand by for final call. All units, this is the final call for Officer Keith Hall. Keith, your service to Hato St John has been lost and your well acknowledgement. The jangling of pocket change will forever be etched into our memories and revisited every time we hear it, forever remembered by those who knew you. Koe Tina, Te Totara, E Te Wao, Nui Atane. The Totara and the Great Forest of Tane is born. All units, this is the final call for Officer Keith Hall. Moi moi, e hoa, rest well my friend.
I guess that ends the, if you like, the official part of proceedings. I'm sure there'll be a lot of memories shared over a few drinks, and I guess the best thing to say is enjoy the rest of the afternoon and all travel safely. I'm not sure if anything's been arranged for a bit of a sign the book or nothing? No.
Photos in front here, open bar.
Okay. So I've just been informed that there are photos in the front if people wish to come up to the casket here, if anybody wants to pay their respects. And it's an open bar. And again I say, please drive safely going home.
Thank you.